have to be your biggest fan. And when things are really tough and they're really rough and nothing's working.
In August 2023, I weighted 55 kilo with 30% of body fat, and by December of the same year, I weighted 49 kilo with 26% body fat. So in the space of 4 months, I lost almost 10 pounds of just pure body fat. And in this video, I'll be telling you the daily micro habits that I have incorporated to help me losing that 10 pounds. Now, this number itself, I know doesn't really sound impressive. I know there's loads of people online who lost way so much weight, but as someone who's in her late 30s and someone who's been struggling with weight and being on and off diet all her life, I feel like these micro habits has given me some sense of enlightenment, so much so that I need to share to the world. Our bodies need protein to build and repair our skin, our bone, our tissues, and protein also helps regulating our hormones. One of the things that I wasn't aware was that most people undereat on protein, and so was I. And since I started to prioritizing protein, eating more protein, I found myself being fuller for longer. Protein also adds volume and substance to my meals, which means that I am eating less of the things that my body doesn't really need. For example, things like highly processed carbs. There are loads of resources online of how much protein you need, but general rule of thumb is you would need a gram of protein for every pound of body weight. So for example, someone who weighs 120 pounds would need 120 grams of protein every day. But if you're more of a visual person, I think the general guide is to consume around a palmful of protein in every single meal, and that should be enough. And the reason that I'm mentioning adding protein or prioritizing protein first is because I want you to focus on abundance, adding more nutritious foods to your diet. As I mentioned, I've been on and off so many different diets all my entire life, especially in my 20s and my early 30s, and none of them ever yield me long-term results because at that time I was focusing on what I couldn't eat. But by focusing first on adding things, I found this is a much more sustainable way and helping your fitness journey a little bit easier. Now, I used to be one of those people that I would throw in a few leaves in my pasta and call that enough vegetables intake. Similar to protein consumption, when you add more vegetables to your meals, you make less room on the plate and your belly for other foods that your body may not need in excess, like processed food. Because I'm sure you know, between broccoli and white rice, you know that broccoli is going to have more nutrients and your body would probably function better if you eat more broccoli than eating more highly processed white rice, which has been stripped out of all the fibers. And I see a lot of people struggle with this because when we cook our meals, we cook the meals based on recipes, especially recipes online that you find. And with those, I find that those recipes most of the time don't give you enough vegetables. So the first tip that I can give when it comes to adding more vegetables to your meals is that I normally just adapt the recipes. Now these days I'll just add more vegetables in them, and they are practically my own recipes with loads of vegetables and protein. Another way that you can add more veggies to your diet, and this is something that I do all the time, which is substituting carbs with vegetables. Most time I would substitute pasta with zucchini noodles, and I will substitute white rice with cauliflower rice or broccoli rice. I've been traveling for the past month, and these two tips are the tips that I use in every single meal, and I find just these two already helps me keeping my body in check and helping me not to overeat. I truly believe that having a good framework or principle instead of nitpicking of what food you can't eat is a better way and more sustainable way when it comes to fitness journey, because then wherever you are in any situation or circumstance, you can then apply these frameworks to help you moving towards your goal without having to rely heavily on willpower. Now, one of the reasons why I started this fitness journey was that I bought myself a continuous glucose monitor, or CGM, and it was completely life-changing. Now, if you don't know, a CGM is a device that monitors your sugar level in your blood continuously, and it will show a result on your phone, so you know immediately after eating certain meals how your body reacts to certain foods. And it changes my perspective about health completely, because it's no longer about not gaining weight or being thin, but it's more about what my body needs, because now I know that excess weight caused by excess sugar intake can not only make you gain weight, but also leads to many diseases such as diabetes, cancer, obesity. And sugar is highly addictive. That's why it's so difficult to stop eating sugar or consuming less sugar, because your body is addicted to it. But at the same time, sugar is also toxic to the body. So when it comes to reduction, one of the first things that I reduced was reducing sugar intake where I can. And this may sound very simple, but
sugar is everywhere, even in some of those things that you think are healthy.
a lot of foods that we buy from the supermarket will have sugar added on them. And after knowing that, I adopted the habits of reducing sugar where I can. So I'm no longer having 3 teaspoons of sugar in my morning coffee every morning. And if I want something sweet, and given that I have time, I would make something myself using stevia rather than using just plain white sugar. And because sugar is everywhere, one of the best ways to help you reduce the sugar consumption is the next habit. Most foods we eat needs to be processed before consumption. So for example, broccoli, asparagus, we need to cook them before consuming them. Chicken, beef, we also need to cook them before eating them. And that's just a normal processing of the food. Ultra processed foods are the foods that go through multiple processes such as extraction, extrusion, molding, milling. They contain ingredients those are highly manipulated. Some examples of ultra processed foods are soft drinks, sweetened breakfast cereals, packaged soups, or frozen chicken nuggets. Basically, a lot of items that we normally buy in the supermarket without realizing that they are ultra processed. If you see a food in a supermarket that is wrapped in a plastic or a container and it contains one ingredient that you don't know what it is, most likely that food is ultra processed food. Now, these ultra processed foods has been highly engineered that it gives us this mouthfeel, it gives us this sense of pleasure, it gives us a dopamine hit, hence why it is so hard for us to stop eating these foods when we start eating it. And therefore, being mindful about the amount of ultra processed foods you're consuming and reducing them when you can actually help you losing fat and maybe some weight and helping you become healthier. As I get older, I realize that the notion of eat less, exercise more isn't really going to cut it anymore, because we can be eating so little amount of the wrong foods. Our gut is our second brain, and the type of foods that we eat actually translates to other aspects of our health and well-being. I find it very helpful to have meals that take less than 15 minutes to put together, and I know these are going to be my core meals and I can have them repeatedly without having to put so much thought into it. For me, the easiest way to incorporate this is breakfast. So for breakfast, I either have a green protein smoothie or protein oatmeal. So with these two options, they are my core breakfast meals, which I know I'm getting all the nutrients that I need. This is more about a mindset habit, but it needs to be said because I think most of the time when we talk about losing weight or wanting to lose weight, what we really mean is losing fat or body recomposition. A pound of muscle and a pound of fat weight exactly the same, but they look completely different. I was right around the same weight for nearly a decade, but over time I started to see this change in my body. Although my weight hasn't really changed, I started to feel like my body becomes a little bit softer, softer, I become weaker. And that's because although I've maintained the same weight, some of that weight has now been replaced with fat rather than muscle. So therefore, just shedding pounds doesn't always translate to having a healthier physique. So by shifting our focus from weight loss to reshaping our bodies, we can actually build a much more functional physique, improve our health markers, and promote longevity. And in order to do this, instead of just focusing on burning as many calories as humanly possible by cardio, I am now focusing on building muscles. I am now focusing on weight training so that I can build a good muscle foundation when I turn 40s and 50s and beyond. For women, we actually lose 1% of muscle mass every year after we turn 40. So building that good foundation is super crucial. This leads me to the next point, which is to find habits-based exercise goal. Multiple research has shown that exercise, especially cardiovascular exercise in itself, doesn't directly translate to weight loss. This is because, first of all, after we do intense exercise, most times than not, we'll get hungrier, which means that we'll tend to eat more to compensate for the calories that we burn. Secondly, if we do so much exercise, we burn so many calories, your body will then try to unconsciously compensate by moving a little bit less or fidget less. But saying that there's so many other benefits to cardiovascular exercises. It's good for your heart, it can also lift your mood, so it is still a good idea to make cardiovascular exercise an essential part of your life, and therefore finding and forming habits-based exercises goals can be helpful. Some example of habits-based exercises are certain steps goals every day. So for me, it would be around 6,000 steps, or you can set a daily goal of doing 15 minutes of yoga every day, or set a goal of running twice a week and make that a habit. Many people, and women in particular, and I know you form the majority of my audience here, put everyone else ahead of themselves and let their health fall behind. I've seen so many people coming to me and say that, oh, I want to go on the same fitness journey like you do, but because I have to do this for A and I have to look after B, so I don't really have time for myself. And I do truly understand that we all have a lot to do and a lot of people to take care of, but when it comes to health and fitness journey, unfortunately, we have to put ourselves first, and you will need to make time for it or for you. It may sound a little bit selfish, but you know what? When you put yourself first, you then become the best version of yourself. And when you become the best version of yourself, then you can give more to other people. It's like when you're on a plane and if there is an emergency, you're always advised to put the mask on yourself first before helping anyone else. Because if you do that, there is a possibility that both of you will suffer. So that's it for me for today. I hope these habits have given you a good framework for you to kickstart your fitness journey. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.